Good evening, everyone. Thank you to everyone who's come to IHS today in person and for everyone joining online. Very excited to introduce Dr. Geeta Thatra, who is the Associate Director of Work Fair and Free, and who will be talking to us about a new piece of work that they've been doing around the future of work in construction and the changing role of women's work in the construction sector. I'll start by introducing Geeta, and then she'll share her presentation and a short film, and then we'll have a discussion together. So, Dr. Geeta is a researcher and writer whose work lies at the intersection of gender, labor, and technology, foregrounding the voices of women and migrant workers in India's informal economies. As I said, she's the Associate Director of Work Fair and Free, where she leads initiatives that connect academic research with workers' struggles for dignity and justice. Geeta holds a PhD in history from JNU, and her doctoral thesis traced the migration and displacement of Sindhi refugees and Muslim evacuees after the 1947 partition, and how the resettlement shaped Bombay's urban landscape. So we have many interconnecting themes, both for migration, urban history, interest in cities, and interest in informal economies. Thank you so much for bringing your presentation here. And if I can ask you to just share your work with us, and we'll take the discussion on later. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. Thanks, Aditi, for that warm introduction. And thanks to IHS for having us here to present our latest piece of work that we've been doing on the future of work in construction and women's participation in it. It's a pleasure to be here with a diverse set of audience, including researchers, and I'm guessing there are practitioners and activists here too. So glad to be here. We'll just the way I've sequenced this presentation is first I'll start with I'll walk you through the research and the findings and the process that we adopted in understanding some of the shifts and changes that are happening within construction and how it's affecting women workers. We'll also watch a short film that we made based on this research. That's one way for us to actually bring in the voices of women workers themselves into this room here. And then we will open it up for discussion. Um, do I have a way to change the slides? Yeah. Thanks. I'll tell you. Um, before I begin, just want to say that this study was actually done through the last couple of years, and it's a collaborative effort between Ajivika Bureau and Workfare and Free. I'm a researcher at Workfare and Free, which is based out of Bangalore, and an organization which has been incubated by Ajivika Bureau. To many of you who would know, Ajivika is a long-standing labor rights organization in the country. And we did this work in collaboration with researchers and practitioners and women workers of the Construction Workers Union based in Ahmedabad. So it's been a joint effort between the two organizations and its teams. I'm going to be actually presenting on behalf of the team today. Just before I start, I thought I'll start with asking this or sharing with you how did this research begin? Because when Tanvi and Aditi, they asked me to send in a note on my fieldwork experience, I thought I went into a reflective journey to think where did this all start? And I came up with these two. Both distressing anecdotes that we had actually begun with. One is that as an organization, we conduct assessments of companies on of their workers in the supply chain, and in those assessments, please don't ask me to name the company, but your guess would be absolutely right. It's one of the large construction firms in the country. Very nonchalantly said that we don't have women on our work sites, and that got us to thinking large infrastructure building, large companies that are producing housing stock for the country, but absolutely have no women workers on their sites. The other experience or example that came to us at that point in time before we started this work was labor contractors telling us that we don't bring women workers to construction sites, and one of the reasons being that they wear ghagra and dupatta, which gets stuck in machines. So with these large construction sites having a lot of equipment, it's very unsafe to have women around. So we don't bring women workers to the sites. So with these two anecdotes in front of us, we began thinking, okay, what role is technology playing in in the construction sites of today, and how is it affecting women workers, and what is going to be their place on the sites of construction tomorrow. With that, we began this study, and I'll just take you through some of the sectoral overview of employment in construction, which is very significant for us to see why the study has so much relevance. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, just to give you a quick overview of the participation of workers in the construction industry, as you all know, it's one of the fastest growing industry, contributing significantly to the country's economy and its GDP. It's a second largest employer after agriculture since the 1990s. And PLFS data from the 22-23 tells us that 13% of the country's workforce is involved in construction, which is almost 68 million workers and 7.6 million women workers in the sector. The industry is heavily reliant on casual labor. Men and women put together, it's about 90% of workers who are informally employed. Who have casual employment in the sector. Again, it's a sector that's heavily reliant on circular migration and migrant workers from resource poor regions coming into these large cities to do construction work. Construction is also seen as in the India Employment Report of 2024. You will see it being described as a catch-all sector, wherein it really absorbs workers during the low periods, but also creates employment during boom periods, right? So it is a sector that absorbs a lot of workers and provides employment. Nonetheless, an employment that's not really formal or dignified or with a lot of labor protections. Within construction, if you look at the data sets, workers are sort of categorized into these three segments: building, civil engineering, and specialized construction. And the specialized construction would involve construction of, say, industrial areas or installation and demolition work that happens. And this percentage that you're seeing on screen is the overall percentage of workers in each of them. And you'll see that building segment has the most number of most concentration of workers. And in that also you will see female workforce. You will not see women workers in infrastructure or industrial construction segments. And this is important because we've also done most of our work around the building segment, and that figure was important in that context. Now, for our own research, we specifically chose Ahmedabad, and Ahmedabad is one of the mid-sized, fast-growing cities. It's also an example of urban-led infrastructure growth. It's a city that is adopting construction technologies in a significant way, and it's slightly different from other big cities. We'll come to those discussions in a bit. When we compare it to, say, Bombay or Bangalore or Hyderabad, the kind of tech adoption is different, but it also gives us a space and time to get a snapshot of what processes are changing and to be able to understand those changes and how it affects workers. So we chose Ahmedabad, and in Ahmedabad, it's hard to get the number of ongoing construction sites. It's hard to get a number of the projects that are going. You'll If you go to RERA website, you'll get a certain figure. If you look at BOCW registrations, you'll get a certain number. But here are some pre-COVID estimates that tell you there are about 1,200 ongoing real estate projects in the city before COVID, and the composition of this workforce was such that in the early 2000s, 80% of the workers were circular migrants from 5 contiguous districts of 3 states in Ahmedabad, which is Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat. So they would come seasonally, work in construction sites, and go back to their rural homes. But they've also been in the city for almost 2-3 decades that they have been involved in construction work. And women form part of the workforce through family-based circular migration. Next slide, please. So when we look at automation that's coming up in technology, construction is one such industry that is said to be hesitant to adopt innovation. It's unlike your aerospace, or it's unlike your automobile industry that has adopted automation or other kinds of technological innovations at a much larger scale. Construction is seen as reluctant to or hesitant to adopt innovations. One of the reports in the of UK. Mark Farmer's report. It says that construction is an industry that has not even adopted industry 3.0, let alone construction industry 4.0 technologies, right? So you will see the adoption of technology significantly different across countries, across cities. To what extent the machinery or the technological changes have happened is very different in different places. So we were like looking at specifically in the city of Ahmedabad and how, and it's of course, and it's twin city Gandhinagar, because a lot of projects we had chosen were on the peripheries of Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar. And what kind of technologies are we talking about? So it was a focused study of even understanding the nature of tech adoption in construction. But definitely, construction 4.0, as we call it, has made some inroads. There is scattered adoption of prefab and modular construction. Building information modeling is being adopted in a significant way in some of the large projects. Again, very varied and disparate. We'll come to some of that discussion. We also understand that some of these technologies are celebrated for increasing speed and efficiency. But for us, the question was that it intersects with existing inequalities. So we started out with this very key question saying, how does automation reorganize labor process? So we were interested in technological change and its reorganization of labor processes. And what does it mean very specifically for women workers who are already on the lower end of the industry skill and value chain? Next slide, please. And before we look at very specifically how did we go about the study, I just want to run you through the structure of the construction industry, which I think is very pertinent in how we have both conceptualized our study as well as in how technology mediates and through these structural hierarchies. Construction is one industry where production is quite different, wherein you don't have factory sites, you don't have permanent work sites, they are temporary in nature. Production is site based. So you will have production happening in one site, and once the construction is over, then you move on to a different site. So you don't even have you don't even have a workforce that is regular and continuous, even with one particular construction company or an organization, right? So it's a different form of production, and workforce shifts are very frequent. It's also an industry which is highly fragmented, very long chain of subcontractors, and that sort of obscures the employer-employee relationship. That makes principal employers much less responsible to their workforce, and their work arrangements are quite informal. And again, gender inequalities are quite rampant in the sector. Women earn 30 to 40% less than their male counterparts. They are concentrated or hired as helpers or unskilled workers, perform certain kinds of physically demanding work like stone crushing, assisting in plastering, load carrying, and concrete mixing. Will come, and each of these tasks have been affected by technology and automation. We'll come to that. And we'll also discuss how women's employment largely in the sector is through Jodi-based recruitment, and how that also has a bearing on where women stand in when new technologies come in. Next slide, please. Just to take a step back and see how did we frame the study and what are the theoretical insights that sort of help us to understand technological adoption in the specific sector here. We drew a lot on feminist science and technology studies, and which is an interdisciplinary area of inquiry, and it broadly argues that technology is socially constructed. A lot of theorists in the field say that technology is not neutral or it's not inherently progressive, but it's socially constructed and it reproduces social inequalities. So that's the framework we sort of adopted in trying to understand technology adoption. Like in any feminist area of inquiry, you have internal agreements and disagreements, and you have different strands of feminist literature. Even within feminist science and technology studies, since the 1980s, you've had different strands of scholarship that has emerged. socialist feminists began with critiques of Marxist analysis that looked at technology merely as a tool of capital, or that looked at technology as merely fragmenting and descaling workers. But they also said that it reinforces gender division of labor, both at home and work. You had radical feminists who came in and critiqued the masculinist culture of engineering, saying that it excludes women's needs and experiences within technology's understanding. You then had a lot of post-structuralist feminists who said that technology and gender are mutually constitutive. You cannot look at them as separate. And they emphasize women's agency in shaping technological change and technological practices. They adopted or worked with the idea of the cyborg, which was Donna Haraway's contribution to look at how machine and human relationship are co-constituted, and what are these entanglements of the body, of the machine, as well as identities. A lot of work around digital technologies and digital work is happening through some of these framings or understandings today. This study particularly goes with Judy Whiteman's theorizing or understanding, where the attempt is not to either have a tech phobia, or to have what she calls technophilia, that you don't only think of technology as an emancipatory tool, but you also are conscious or cautious about the differences or inequalities in technology's design, access, and labor. So once you do that, you try and look at technology not as something that will change gender relations, but it's actually feminist politics that will be able to change gender relations, yet technology being a tool in it, and how do you shape it. So that's actually the framework that informed our study, and that's what we adopted in looking at some of the data that came in front of us. Thank you. Next slide, please. And just placing our work also in the larger context of the existing scholarship that has happened in the space of automation and gender, and looking at labor processes. Scholars have been very interested from the time of industrial revolution to the digital era to look at how technology is affecting either jobs or skills or employment or inequalities, and it continues to be a very important concern even today. Some of the early works in the field, especially in recent times, have been looking at. There have been fears of technological unemployment since the coming of AI or coming of other new platform related work in digital technologies. But more sobering work has come recently that has said that outcomes are uneven across sectors and across countries and across worker groups. And that need to be carefully studied, rather than just saying that, okay, complete jobs are going to be displaced, and occupations are going to be lost, and workers will it will lead to massive unemployment. And we also have seen that scholarship is moving from occupation based view to a task based view, to look at specific tasks that are going to be affected by different technologies, and how that's going to affect employment and participation of workers. um, in the scholarship, we see that there's a significant gap in scholarship from the global south, and particularly from South Asia. Some of the early ILO works have told us that Southeast Asian countries are at almost the risk of losing half of their employment, and in that due to automation. But again, sobering work with sector-specific studies that employed a lot of female workforce have told us that the displacement is limited, but labor control has increased. And what does that mean within those sectors, and how automation plays out, is quite significant. In Indian context, we do not have too many works that have looked at automation per se, or technologies that have come in before digital technologies. There's a lot more work on platform work now. But in some of the older sectors, like banking and electronics and telework, the studies that we have tell us that it really created opportunities for women to become part of the workforce. But over a period of time, it increased precarity. And how that happened is something that has been studied at least in a few sectors, like banking and electronics. And our study sort of fills this gap where we're looking at construction as a sector, where it's one of the first attempts, at least to our knowledge, where we are bringing in the story of technology from the perspective of informal migrant workers at the bottom of the pyramid in the supply chain. Uh, yeah, so that's where we come in. We came and we asked very simple questions actually. Uh, Three broad questions. We ask, what is the nature of tech adoption in construction? What are these cyber physical technologies that have come in? And in these two cities that we are looking at, how are labor processes changing, and what happens to women's work wages and working conditions, and what are their barriers for upward mobility? Because we realize that there are limited opportunities for them for skill development and so on. So, what are those challenges that we can have been women have been encountering? So we started off with these three broad questions. Next slide, please. Is the ticker here? Can I use it now? No, not yet. Okay. Um, okay. So, in terms of methodology, we adopted a feminist participatory action research methodology. It's a way in which we center the voices of workers or experiences of women workers at the core of the study, and it's a way to bring in. Those voices and those concerns at the center of the research. And it's also from their perspective, that not just their perspective but also their experiences, that drive the entire research. It's As I initially said, it's a collaborative effort between Ajivika Bureau and Work Fair and Free. It's also been a collaborative effort with the Construction Workers Union in Ahmedabad, Bankam Mazdoor Vikas Sangh. They've been centrally part of framing, conceptualizing the study and validating some of the findings, as well as in dissemination. So the work has been done in collaboration with the Workers Union of Ahmedabad, and we did this over a period of say 14 months, from December 23 to February 2025, where we walked through different labor nakas and high-rise construction sites and off-site factories to understand what is the nature of technological shift that's happening. This is a team. We were a 13 members team. It included women worker leaders. It included our labor practitioners and activists, as well as researchers. It was a collaborative effort right from starting out to think of what questions to be asked, and to currently disseminating the work in different platforms that each of us have an opportunity to present our work in. And yeah, it's owing to this team that this work has been fulfilled. The research sites that we chose in Ahmedabad, we it's an in-depth study of four sites, and we these four sites were chosen to capture technological variation in each of them, and what is the adoption as well as women's participation across these four sites. We used two criteria. One is form work. I'll come to it as to what the form work means. One is the formwork, that's the structure of the building that decides the number of workers and the kind of workforce that would be required for a particular project. So that determined our choice of the site as well as the budget. We were looking at slightly more capital intensive projects, or projects that are adopting technologies in high rise construction. And we looked at a combination of commercial and residential construction, to also see what are the different dynamics that are playing out in the workforce composition across these projects. We chose one infrastructure project. Again, I can't name which project that was, but yeah, we chose one infrastructure project, and we looked at a couple of off-site construction factories, which is including the AAC block factories and precast factory and batching plants. So we looked at these three different off-site construction processes. Yeah, and how did we go about it? We adopted qualitative methods. We mostly conducted in focus group discussions and process mapping. You'll realize why it's significant in terms of the method that we've used. We spoke to workers in different groups, asking them, tell us at each task, what kind of changes do you observe in terms of technology, and what was the nature of your work prior. say 10 years ago, and what was your nature of work now, and where do you see changes, and where do you see reduction or increase, and where is women's participation, and associated, what are the wages? So that's the kind of discussion we engaged in across these different with these different groups. We also spoke to trainers who, because one of our questions was about what barriers that do women face in upward mobility. So we spoke to a lot of on the job trainers. They're mostly either labor contractors or skilled male workers who provide these trainings to women workers. And so we spoke to a lot of these male trainers who've been in the industry for a while and have a sort of a tacit understanding of these changes and experiences of how the industry has been shifting. Of course, we did a lot of in-depth interviews, and we did few life histories of women who are part of our OJT programs, to be able to understand all the entire story of where they come from, what kind of work they do, has there been any difference in that work, and also what their aspirations are going forward. And of course, we went to a lot of sites and a lot of informal conversations that happened in the process. And like I've said, some of these spaces were actually not merely spaces for data collection. With the methodology that we had adopted, it became spaces for discussion. It became spaces to actually name the exclusion. It actually became places where people could actually begin to. It's not a conversation that you would have otherwise, right? Like. Uh, uh, women workers would first tell us, हमको काम नहीं मिलता है, we don't get work, or we don't get work for enough number of days. And but they wouldn't realize that it is because of either this machine or that machine or this technology, or why is it that contractors are not taking us anymore. But the moment you start probing, they begin to reflect and also start sharing some of these things, and observations around what a particular technology means for them in terms of their own labor over a period of time. So these spaces actually became place for reflection and naming some of those exclusions. Yeah. Now I'm actually going to come to our key findings, and how have we seen the changes that have happened. In Ahmedabad, we are beginning to see that rise of automation is largely from the 2010 onwards, and within the building segment. So a lot of the technologies that you would have earlier seen in, say, infrastructure projects or in road construction or in highway metro construction, had made their inroads into building segment, and that was key in terms of the changes that were happening there. And we've mapped about five key changes that we have observed. One is increased use of automated machines, and I'll come to each of these in a bit to say what it means in terms of the workforce composition and where do women stand. But one is increased use of automated machines on site. Second is changes in the way concrete is produced. And concrete production, like I said earlier, women were a significant part of concrete mixing on site. And so, what happens when concrete mixing is automated? Third is innovations in formwork. Formwork is the structural preparation that goes into any building. And what happens when your conventional structural preparation would be in the form of an RCC formwork, right? Your reinforced concrete cement formwork. And what happens when different technologies or different forms of structural preparations are used, and what that leads to various other tasks that will subsequently follow structural preparation. We see new building materials that are being used. One critical change is from clay red bricks to AAC blocks. You would have seen that across cities in terms of this significant change. The last one that we've mapped to some extent is use of precast construction. And precast construction is where you have all your components being manufactured in a factory setting and then transported on site and assembled. And this you would initially see a lot on your metro projects or in flyovers, but now you're also seeing it in building construction or in high rise construction. So what does that mean in for construction as a sector itself that is getting industrialized? Because I told you that it's a different form of production, that it's on site work that happens, right? But now you have a lot of work that's happening in the factory and getting assembled on site. So coming to all of the newer technologies that are part of construction 4.0 or seen as emerging technologies, what we realized was things like BIM or drones are being used in some sites, but mostly they're all at experimental stages or in pilot stages. They also depend on the capital intensive nature of the project, or if there's government support for some of those projects, only then you see a lot of these emerging technologies being used. Otherwise, in most projects we studied, they're non-existent. And even if they do, it's tough to sort of map the changes that will how it will affect the last worker within the construction process. But what we majorly saw in some of the projects that we studied, they are almost non-existent. So we are seeing a very early stages of transition. We are seeing an uneven adoption of technology, especially within the building segment. We studied the high-rise projects, but if you go to a small bungalow construction, or if you go to a small independent house that's being constructed, there's not much adoption of a lot of these technologies that we are speaking about. But what we see is they will soon be there. Like you will see that a bulldozer has become ubiquitous. You will see concrete coming from outside, even on small construction sites. So some of these changes will affect even the smaller sites, but at the moment it's very uneven. So you will not see it across all construction projects. You'll also see increased task specialization and outsourcing. I'll come to some of this. And the last bit that I said, we are seeing an industrialization of construction. It's the factory based production model that is coming in within the sector. Okay. Yeah. I'll quickly go over some of these specific changes in each of these segments that I spoke about, and also show you broadly. These are you will see some numbers now going forward, and these are estimates that we've collected from the field. So they are not, and they're based on the few case studies that we've done, where we've looked at very specifically asked workers and site engineers and project managers to tell us how work has shifted, and what would be the workers that would have been employed in a particular task or an activity prior, and if there is a change in either a production method or in a construction task or an activity, how would that affect workforce composition. So through that we sort of tried and got an estimate of changes in different phases of construction. Some of the areas where women were employed in a significant way and changes have happened are especially building material handling, use of lot of cranes and lifts and line pumps and pressure pumps. These are all equipment to transport your material to put in concrete at the site. It leads to a lot of women not being part of that workforce. And our estimates show us that in loading and unloading or in material supply activities, there's almost a 75 to 80% decline in women work in workforce generally, but more specifically women workers who would have otherwise been part of any construction site to do this work if they had not used a lot of these machines, right? Bar bending is another one. In a precast factory, you see these machines that are operating in like this great speed, cutting your reinforcements and bending them in ways that you would require them for site. It's a manual. It's a simple machine on site that you will see, where workers are cutting and then bending those reinforcements. But it's happening at great speed in a precast factory that we saw. But now you don't see it on site as of now. But soon, if they will be on site, it will further reduce the workers who will be doing that kind of work. And a lot of machine operation is mostly by skilled male workers across different tasks and activities. And in the context of Ahmedabad, they are workers largely from UP and Bihar who are part of this workforce. This is how an RMC plant looks, a batching plant. They can be set up on site or off site. On site is set up if it is a very large project and if they need concrete round the clock and if they need concrete at very short intervals. But there are also specialized agencies that supply concrete. So if it's a smaller project, you can outsource it to an agency, and that agency will supply the required amount of concrete for your particular project, which is what we will see with small projects. That now you no more have a lot of mixing happening on site, but you will have them supplied by these transit mixers to your project. Next slide. And these are fully automated plants. You just have to enter what quantities of different materials have to be used, and it will produce that concrete that is being required. It used to be a niche activity. In about 20 years, uh, the city of Ahmedabad has seen a jump from 3 to 4 batching plants to 350 to 400 batching plants. So you sort of this indicates both the boom of construction as well as in how this particular task itself has been automated and become a more mainstream activity in any construction project. And there are some numbers here that will give you also how manual mixing would have required 5 times more workers than automated plants. And that's the reduction of workforce that we're talking about in one particular process. Next slide, please. These are two different formworks that I'd like to show you all. One is on your left, it's aluminum formwork or Mivan technology. On your right is steel composite formwork. We studied these two formworks or structural preparation in comparison to the RCC formwork, which is your conventional technique of construction. Go to the next slide, please. And these are we see these shifts happening much more in, say, cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad, where they really help speedy construction. But in Ahmedabad, they are still nascent. This steel composite formwork was the first project that was happening in Ahmedabad that we studied. And of course, aluminum formwork is more prevalent. But each of them lead to significant reduction in the workforce, particularly in labor-intensive tasks like masonry and plastering. Those are steps where you will need most workforce, and these two don't require that kind of masonry and plastering, and hence it's an indirect way of reducing labor-intensive tasks in a construction process. Right. And so there are some, again, numbers that we learned from the engineers who say that slab cycle get reduced. Construction can happen simultaneously at different floors with these technologies. And most significantly, there's an economic calculation to this that um, in Ahmedabad, we see that a lot of these technologies are used for commercial high rise because they feel that even if you delay the project by a year, your clients will lose crores of rupees, right? And if you were to deliver the project sooner, they can recover the higher cost that would have been incurred to construct the project using these technologies or these different formwork processes. But we don't see that as much in residential construction in Ahmedabad because the demand of the demand for such residential construction is not that high. And we've been told that you will see a lot more adoption in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi of aluminum formwork, which in residential construction. So there are also differences across cities in terms of which formwork is used. And of course, the newer forms of formwork are more expensive. But there's a calculation whether it will offset the cost for a particular project. Yes. Um, Again, a quick just an overview for all of you in terms of where a lot of changes have been happening, and we did that at different processes. We looked at what technologies have come in and how we used one project as the baseline, which is your RCC project. And the other two are different formwork projects, and at different stages, how it's leading to reduction of the workforce in different processes. And overall, we will see that you can expect anywhere between 30 to 60% reduction in the workforce across different projects. So depending on what technologies you've used at different stages, you can expect a change then. Now we'll shift our lens to a little bit on the off-site processes that are happening. And so we studied one of the AAC two AAC block factories. And again, they are quite a few in number in the city in the peripheries. And they're being promoted to be used in high-rise construction for various reasons. Next slide, please. And the composition of the workforce here is slightly more balanced. You have about 20-25% women workers still in some of these factories. But what you see is they are the tribal migrants from Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, who are the earlier workforce that were part of the construction industry in the city. And it's worksite housing, 12-hour work shifts. So that's the kind of process that happens in these they're automated plants, and different layers of workforce that are involved. And this is an example of a precast factory that we studied. There are about three or four in the city. With precast, particularly, what we realized was it was post 2014 that it started being used in Ahmedabad, and post COVID-19 is when a lot more use of precast components started happening in the construction processes. Again, largely used for earlier in metros and flyovers, but today even in high-rise construction, uh, seen as very beneficial for commercial construction. And in terms of the workforce that is part of these factories, we see that in a precast company, there are about 900 to 1,000 workers. Of them, only 40 were family migrants. So there's almost a near absence of women in these factories, and even if they are present, they're only doing cleaning or housekeeping work. Same goes to the precast yard of an infrastructure project. There were just women who were doing housekeeping work outside the yard, not part of the construction process itself. So when you have we've been arguing that once construction moves offsite, you will see very few women being part of the construction workforce, and this seems to be the way forward for the industry. Um, I'll just now wrap up some of these. What we saw so far has been some of the changes in the construction process and how that affects workforce composition. But now we look at how it intersects with both migration and caste and ethnicity in among the workers that we looked at in Ahmedabad. We all know that it's a very stratified labor force. As I told you, circular migrants from certain regions, particularly Gujarat, Rajasthan, and MP, and women are hired as Jodi in from some of these regions. What we see in high rise construction today is a preference for long distance migrants. And now there's increasing employment or work or participation of workers from these five states: UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, and Chhattisgarh. You see builders preferring them. They will be they will be living on work site, they will be working there. 12-hour shift is the norm in these on these construction sites, and few women or few workers being hired from labor nakas. They all reside on site and work there. Again, there's a difference in terms of recruitment from each of these regions. Some of them are labor gangs, some of them are caste based networks through which recruitment happens. And again, there's a difference in women workforce participating, women workers from these different regions participating. For example, Chhattisgarhi women will be as part of Jodi in masonry. Women from Jharkhand and West Bengal will largely be in cleaning work or housekeeping work, which is called colloquially depart ka kaam. So that's the kind of work that they would be involved in. We also see a lot of wage disparities. There's a table that shows you difference on wages with respect to people coming from different regions, and they're also based on wage negotiations that would have happened with the labor contractor at the time of recruitment. You'll also see same work being paid differently. You'll also see gender disparities in wage. Women workers generally earn 10 to 20% less than unskilled workers, and 40 to 50% less than male skilled workers. And this is across regions. You'll also see that payments are made through the Jodi system. So you have women whose work is seen as dependent wage, and their labor then becomes undervalued or invisible in the process of this kind of recruitment. And they don't really gain from any of the automation gains. I'll come to that in a bit. Um, women continue. And what is this? We've been using the word skilled and unskilled, right, so far. So, what is this skilled and unskilled that we're talking about? And when we look at these official skill categories, which are also categories used to determine what your minimum wage is, we realize that these are socially constructed categories, and they do not have anything to do with actual work that people are doing. For example, unskilled is defined as you have some training and you have very less work experience, a year or two of work experience. But if you have women who've been 10 years on a work site and doing construction work, they're still being called helpers, they're still being called unskilled workers, and they're being paid as unskilled workers. So some of these categories are also, in a way, have their politics in terms of who gets what in terms of wages and who gets to do what kind of work, right? And women's tacit knowledge, because that's very critical, right? In processes like masonry or plastering, they have been on work site, that they understand very well how do you take the concrete, at what time do you give it to the mason, and how do you plaster, and so on and so forth. And if that dexterity or that agility is not there, the mason will not be able to finish their work, right? So that tacit knowledge is remains unrecognized in this entire valuation of skill and wages. So in classic Marxist theory, yeah, automation is sort of seen as a way in which tasks get fragmented and workers get de-skilled. That you don't, that you are not able to climb up the skill hierarchy, and whatever skill you have, it's going down. But in the case of automation and women workers, we see that it's a structural denial of being part of skilled trade. So you're not really getting de-skilled, but you do not have an opportunity to get skilled. And that's a difference that we sort of see from uh, the idea of de-skilling within through automation in construction. And this notion of feminized auxiliaries, that women are part of the workforce at the margins of production, that they are doing housekeeping work, that they are doing cleaning work, they are doing very support activities. And the moment, even in those support activities, when you have, for example, if they are part of cleaning, and if you have a cleaning gorge that comes, women are not there. Or if they were earlier handling material, but if there's a lift, women are not operating that lift. But it's the male workers or supervisors who are operating those lifts. So completely kept out of any kind of automated technologies or machinery or equipment that comes into these sites. Um, so we were asking this question to ourselves: how does automation deepen these gender hierarchies? And that's broadly our argument also, that automation is not really leading to certain transitions, but it's leading to deepening of the existing hierarchies. It is a construction, as we began with, is a sector with deep embedded inequalities. And we see that it leads to skill polarization. That is, you have machine operators who are becoming fully skilled, or outsourced workers who are part of the construction workforce, or you have these male helpers who are at the end of the skill hierarchy. So your middle workers are reducing in numbers, and that's creating a polarization of skill. We're seeing that in offsite production processes or construction spaces, there are hardly any women, almost absent. We're also seeing that women are operating some of these machines. Whether it's lifts or whether it is flooring work, there are women who are doing that work, but it's contingent. If a supervisor is not there, or if a male worker is not there, they are doing it, but it's not institutionalized. It's not in a way that is systemic, and that they are able to pursue those activities and get remunerated accordingly, right? So you're doing that work but not getting paid for it, or being recognized as a skilled worker. And I'll just end with some of these quotes for y'all to see in because we spoke, like I said, we spoke to a lot of. Go to the next slide, please. We spoke to a lot of different actors on construction sites and tried to understand how do they look at women's employment, how do they look at women's work, or opportunities for skill development. And these are some of the things we hear. And I guess it's not something that I'll have to go very deep to explain, because a lot of them are quite telling in themselves. And within construction, you will see a lot of gendered assumptions playing out, and which devalues women's work. There are assumptions of what is naturally a woman's work. There are assumptions of what women can do, whether they can lift weights, whether they can do risky work, whether they can do heavy work or not. And that sort of also contributes to what work they will end up doing on the sites, right? Some of the things about women are suitable to do cleaning, but not rebar cutting, because steel reinforcements are heavy and they can't be doing it. And labor contractors will just not hire them when they bring. So, like I said, it's greatly outsourced. In one project, we saw at least about 200 contractors. And if there's a labor contractor who brings workers for a particular trade like reinforcement cutting and shaping, they will not even bring women, saying that it's heavy work और औरतें महिलाएं ये काम नहीं कर सकती हैं, right? So at that entry point you are blocked. um, there are safety discourses that are prevalent, saying that अगर महिला को कुछ हो गया तो उसकी पूरी फैमिली सफ़र करेगी. So it's okay कि मेन को कुछ हो गया तो चलेगा ना. कि अगर महिला को चोट लग गई, and if she hasn't had an injury, the entire family will suffer. We can't let that happen. So we don't give women this kind of heavy work. We don't train them into certain kinds of skills. Women workers themselves have told us that a supervisor does not allow us to go near big machines. And you have to understand that within construction, it's a craft based industry. A lot of learning happens on site. It's not that people go to a technical training school and learn some of these trades and then come and work. It's work that you learn by looking at other. It's an apprentice model, right? You learn by looking, you learn by working with a skilled worker, and then you grow up the skill ladder in any trade within construction. But women do not even have that opportunity to stand and look and see if they are able to pick up a particular trade or particular skill, and that sort of blocks their career pipeline. Next one. Care burdens and women as liability. This is like the most disheartening argument, that it's a circular argument as well, that women come with kids. We do not want to provide facilities for the kids. It's unsafe, and hence we do not want women. An institutional responsibility on contractors, on employers to provide creches or other facilities is becoming a way to not employ women. And that becomes a great challenge, that where if without such facilities, how are women going to continue participating in construction activities? And there are outright statements that are made that we prefer single men, we don't want women and children on sites, and all in the name of safety. Again, this is, I think, a little important one, where there are also social norms and everyday negotiations that women have to. So you will see that workplace biases or gender assumptions also play out for women to negotiate with their own families. So if you have to learn a trade, and if you have to work with a male worker who's not from your family, then you all of that training also happens within a social boundary, and it's tough. They have to convince their families whether they have to pursue certain trainings. If they're a skilled worker, they'll have to talk to many more. They'll have to negotiate a rate for their helper with the labor contractors. They'll have to be recognized as a skilled worker. So there are a lot of challenges that without family support or community support, it gets further difficult for women workers. And women's responses have been, what we have seen, have been ambivalent. It's either they withdraw, saying that this is not work for us, but more often than not, they are interested in learning, and they are part of unions and collectives. And there is an effort or a demand from women workers that we want to be trained, we want to learn these skills, and we want to be part of the construction workforce, because this is a very significant employment for us. Um, I'll end with this one slide, which is to look at what were some of the limitations or challenges within our study, and what is the future scope for work in this area. Um, our study has also been limited to the sites that we've been able to study and access. Accessing high rise construction projects or any construction projects is extremely difficult for researchers. But if you're able to access multiple different varieties of sites, it's a great thing, and we'll be able to get more perspectives and we'll be able to learn more. So that's another future direction of research. And within our methodology, which was feminist participatory action research methodology, we really go in depth rather than breadth. So again, scope for generalization is limited. So if there is a possibility that there is a complementary survey or mixed methods use, that can also give us more numbers, and possibility of generalizing is another way of doing it. Multiple other cities and sites are a next question. Two other interesting things that we realized that we didn't do in our project and are possible is to look at embodied experience of women and technology. Is to see if women are operating certain machineries, what is that experience like, and what that experience means for their work. The other one is if women have been displaced of work, what longitudinally tracking what they're doing and what are the, or if they've been reskilled, uh, how their work is continuing in construction. So these are some of the possibilities for future research. I will not go into these recommendations. We can come to it in the discussion. And just to close, we sort of see that technology is not a neutral disruptor in the world of work. It is embedded in this gendered labor regime that we have discussed today, and it's mediated by social norms. And tech adoption is significant and important, but it has to be accompanied by enabling environment and recognition of women's labor, without which we will not see women at work sites, and women's participation in construction continues to be a very critical concern for us. Yeah, so with that, thank you. And just show the next slide. And these are the various team members I'd like to thank who've been part of this study in different ways and in different capacities. Thank you for your patience with this long presentation. We'll now watch a film that we've made based on this study with the women workers we explored.
Um, I that was a really detailed and very nicely articulated presentation. Thank you for that. I'm also still uh, thinking about the film that we're just watching, but I think so. I've been engaging with a lot of conversations around jobs and automation in the last few months, especially with the India AI Impact Summit coming up not too far from now. And there's a very clear idea that is kind of prevalent in those rooms, that questions of automation are really about questions of cognitive skills and the displacement of engineering roles and coding and software and white collar enterprise functions, which are all true and relevant to the conversation. But there's almost a very easy way of invisibilizing that any of this manual work is going to be impacted, right? And I think the more people start to learn about how these types of sectors are being impacted, I think it'll also might create a little bit of fear around it, right? Because the value of the construction sector and the informal sector has been to absorb so many of our workers that we haven't been able to give good quality, decent work to. And so I want to kind of first thank you for putting in so much effort into really detailing out all the different forms of displacement and change that are taking place. I think we don't necessarily hear that. Um, and I actually want to take off from the film that we just watched. And I think what was really lovely with that is you actually heard from people who were having to face this, right? And when we were having our conversation earlier, I thought there was something very interesting that you said is that, the women don't understand that there's a displacement taking place. Um, they see the world change around them, but they're not quite sure how to place themselves in it. So, can you help us understand a little bit more about how they articulate this? What in their minds is changing? Has something about how they perceive risk or how they perceive work changed? Has the relationships at the Naka changed? And very importantly, has something changed about the way in which the jury is functioning now, right? If it's not a recruitment unit, what is happening to that family unit? And yeah, you can start by telling us that.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Aditi, for those questions. And I would agree with you that this conversation is happening w- um, at not at this level, and it's very important because it's one of the sectors that really absorbs a significant workforce and is providing employment in such large numbers. So if any change is going to happen here, it's going to affect like really millions of workers. But it's difficult also for us to trace these changes. For instance, if in a factory, one particular machine had to be introduced, and if that leads to retrenchment of a certain number of workers, that's quite visible to the workers themselves, both who are laid off and the ones who are not, right? And they're also able to attribute it to a certain change. But within construction, it's very difficult because if today, with a certain kind of technology and certain kind of equipment on a particular site, a particular builder is employing about 400 or 500 workers. With very different technology, you could be employing just 200 workers on your next site, and that will not lead you to any conclusion that 400 workers have been displaced, right? So it's very tough to even to map and count and tell what is the nature of displacement or the extent of displacement that's happening. But we're able to estimate, at least if you look at some of the broad estimates in, Professor Ravi Srivastava has done this work to say that over a period of time within construction, there has been a secular decline of women's participation. And that is a big number that we have in front of us. And then we have these experiences from these various sites that tell us that, okay, these are certain changes. And if we pay attention to these kind of processes, we'll be able to map some of the changes, right? Um, Also, to your second question about how it's playing out in the labor nakas and how women themselves perceive it, so these shifts are perceived very differently at a work site or a construction site and a labor naka, right? So some of the women you've heard in the film, they are part of the workers union. They're also part of the construction workforce for decades now in the city, and they're seasonal migrants, and they have been articulating the shift more in terms of not being able to find work, by saying that, okay, these many days I don't get work. That's also because they go largely to small building sites. And in small building sites, there is still women's labor force, women's participation, not in the numbers that we are seeing. And it's interesting also that the construction boom is not in the small building sites. It is in large high rise projects. It is where women from labor nakas are not recruited, or workers from the labor nakas are not recruited. You have a very different workforce that comes and works on construction sites, who reside there, who work there, right? And they are your, again, seasonal migrants, but from either same regions or different regions. So the articulation of change is very different if you speak to workers on a work site versus if you speak to workers on a naka. uh, Within Naka workers, they will tell you, for example, concrete being one of the very important changes that they are able to observe, or changes where it's also interesting. One of the workers told us that हम जैसे ह्यूमन हैंड्स प्लास्टरिंग करेंगे, कोई मशीन नहीं कर सकता है, तो आप भूल जाइए कि हम लोगों का काम खत्म हो जाएगा. So they're also saying this because they have a certain understanding of what a clean finish looks like, because today you also have construction sites where you are not having that clean finish of a plastered work, right? So they have a certain understanding of their own skill and what manual work in construction means, and some of them do feel that they will not get displaced because that's the kind of skill that they have. But again, we don't see that across projects with the newer forms of form work. You don't need plastering, and we are accepting standardized construction processes with high rises, and so it's okay that you don't have that kind of finish that we expect in a small project. So there are shifting articulations of it, and
Yeah. And I think it's really important because I think the question of how to measure these changes is a question everyone has to take into their into their toolkit of research, right? Whether you're just existing in the world around us or a professional researcher, I think being able to spot how to tell the difference in the people that we interact with is really key. And I hope that's one thing that this Publics can help offer, is that when we think about automation, it's not the chat GPT enterprise function. It is really, and it's not even thinking about tech, it's breaking down engineering, the processes of engineering, the materials that they create, the financing that shifts, and then the end worker who kind of gets impacted by it. And I'm going to also read some questions that have come in online. We have participants on Zoom also. And if I could also just ask, maybe we can share the mics around, because I know we have a very engaged audience here, and I would love to, give this opportunity to everyone. I'll just ask this question that's come in from a listener online. Um, this is Ambi. Thank you, Geeta, for your detailed and insightful presentation. I'm following up on your point about the social construction of skills, evident in the documentary too. In your research, did you observe the ways in which women workers navigate or circumvent these constructed skill hierarchies? And if so, what kind of strategies do they employ? What are the reactions of male counterparts in such situations?
Thank you for that question. Women do negotiate and circumvent some of those constructions. Like you heard Savita Ben in the film say that, I have learned how to operate a machine. I know I have been trained, and there have been women workers who've said that I'm a skilled worker and I get recognized as such. But these are also few examples that are in front of us. It's not a norm. Across the board, you have women workers who, even after being trained, are not recognized as skilled workers. They don't receive the wages of a skilled worker. And a lot of work actually happens in Jodi, both at small work sites and in large work sites. So your recruitment itself is in a way that one will be a skilled worker and the other one will be a helper. And so you have a Jodi of two male, or you have a jodi of a male and a female. But having a female skilled worker as the main person, and having a male helper, is not very often that we see on sites or even from the labor naka. And so those are that's not really the norm on in any of the projects that we've seen. So they are good examples for us. And they're also inspiring to other women workers to pursue skilling. But from our experience, it's not the norm on construction sites, and labor contractors also very often do not recognize women as skilled workers. And it's tough, it's really tough on a labor naka for a woman worker to stand and negotiate, because if you're getting picked up for work for that day, you have to bargain and negotiate with the labor contractor to be chosen for work and to be paid at a certain level. And that is a daily negotiation, and that negotiation is a challenging one. But nonetheless important. There are women who are challenging and circumventing those constructions, but it's tough.
Few and far between. Can we just pass the mic to Janvi?
Thanks, Geeta. Excellent presentation. I have so many questions and I'm still articulating in my head, but maybe just the top questions that I have is, are women construction workers, when you say they're displaced, do they end up doing any other form of work? And what is that? The second is, we also have employers and state who are obsessed with efficiency right now. And with this sort of research, if you were to, what is the argument that you would give? Especially, they like numbers, and it's a qualitative data. And you also had a recommendation on the study that there needs to be a much larger study. And if we want to get the numbers, what are the key questions on which you want that? What is the sort of data, macro level data that you think will be useful going forward for advocacy? Because we see women, I mean, this is a sector women love to work also because it gives money, and migrant workers don't get any other form of work but this. So it is an important sector. So these are my questions.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think those are also tough questions. Sorry,
Janvi,
what was the first question? I remember the second one, which has to do with
Displacement. If they're getting
displacement.
what do they do?
What do they? Yeah, that's something that we were not able to track within our study. It's a question that needs to be explored. What is it that women do? Because we were able to meet women who are actually on construction sites or who are looking for work from the labor nakas. But we did not really spend too much time working or talking to women who are not who were initially part of construction work but are not no longer. We know that they have left construction work, but not necessarily because they've been displaced, but also because their bodies are fragile, they're not able to do this kind of work, or they are moving on to do more of housework, care work, which also is not supported. So some women withdraw into care work, and other women in the household then take up construction work. So that's the kind of women we interacted with. So not specifically track those who have been displaced, but that's a very important question and needs to be explored. Um, in terms of data, what kind of data we would require, I think it would, of course, your some of your NSS and PLFS data will give you some indications if you were to longitudinally look at the trends within the sector. And there are macro figures that tell you that there is declining workforce participation of women in construction. Um, and but these are studies that will give you more specific insight into where is it that you see the decline, and where is it that you can also make an intervention, because your macro data will actually not give you that kind of an insight that within construction processes where is it that women are missing, right? So I think while the macro data is required, even nuanced or very qualitative studies like this are important to tell us within a construction life cycle of a project what is happening and where are women present and absent. With respect to the efficiency argument, it's a tough one to it's a tough one to crack. But it's what is important to also show is that women are doing that kind of work. It's just that they're not being acknowledged or recognized. It's not that if women are going to be participating, your efficiency is going to go down. It's not that women are not equipped to do certain kind of work. I think that's what a study strongly sort of tells us, that your efficiency will still happen if you have women workers. There is no need to displace them to hold on to efficiency. These are not either or options.
Sorry, Aditi, there's just one follow-up question. In general, the number of laborers are reducing at work sites. Is the number proportionately reducing for both men and women, or is it
I don't
more for women?
I don't have the proportionate numbers. I think that would be an important thing to look at. So I don't have that number right away to give you. But we do see a lot of change in manual composition of manual workers. At least in the processes we've outlined, there is a reduction of both male and female workers. And even within that, it's very interesting. It's not ubiquitous male worker. It is the Adivasi male worker. Who has been part of the construction workforce for a significant period of time, who is now able to demand a certain wage. If you look at the wage according to region, they are at the top within the wage hierarchy in Ahmedabad, right? So it's not like any male worker is getting displaced. It is the Bhil Adivasi worker who is now having a certain foothold in the industry, who is able to negotiate a certain wage, who is no longer required. And they're family migrants, and because they come with women, they are not required. So you want replaceable single male migrants who come from long distances, who can stay in your construction sites for longer. So I think when the moment you look at these intersections, it becomes even more interesting to not just say it's a woman worker versus a male worker. It's a woman Adivasi worker and a male Adivasi worker who is getting displaced.
So can you actually, just borrowing from that, just taking off from that, so because Ajivika Bureau is really really important in being able to explain migration policy and how workers fit into that. So can you help me understand, can you contextualize this within larger migration policy, right? So migration policy seeks to make certain things happen, prevent certain things, support people as they move. When you see such a drastic change in seasonal migration taking place, how do you think that will kind of impact the way we think about social security, or the way we think about how certain states relate to each other, or what's even happening at the kind of home village that people are coming from? Did you get a sense from how people were speaking, or could you help us just contextualize this a little bit within the larger idea of how people move in India?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think I have a straightforward answer to your question, Aditi. I think we'll have to spend some more time thinking about what does this really mean in terms of whether it's going to actually change migration patterns, whether it is going to change the kind of sectors of work that they're going to be involved in. Are they going to move to either more precarious forms of work, or are they going to move to forms of work that are because they have a certain foothold in the city? Are they going to move into work sectors that are improve working conditions than construction? So I think those are questions that will require a more deeper investigation to be able to answer.
Understood. Fair enough.
Uh, Hi, Geeta. Thank you for a very good presentation and a very powerful film. So, I was the one thing that I was wondering about, that there's a relation between, you said that in construction, there has been lesser adoption of technology as opposed to many other sectors, and that has a very good relation with wages. So, if it's cheaper to hire laborers, probably technology will not be adopted. But since now the technology has been adopted, probably does it also affect the negotiating capacity of labor in terms of wages? Because if they increase their wages or ask for higher wages, then technology seems to be a better option. So one is that, and the second thing I was wondering, is there a sort of gendered nature in innovation of technology as well? Like, which kind of jobs are being replaced? Is it the jobs that women were doing, for example, loading and unloading, is that being replaced by technology, or is it something which previously mostly men were doing? So is there a sort of net transfer of jobs from women to men? So which kind of jobs are being replaced is what I'm wondering. And the third question is, how are the you said that many of these women are part of unions. So what has been the response of unions to this uh, adoption of technology as such? I mean, yes, in relation to women also, but in general, in relation to like the reduction in number of laborers that are being employed, or if they are fired in case. So how have the unions been responding to this?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. And as all the other questions, quite difficult to respond to. I think it's both an advantage and a disadvantage of the methodology we've adopted, that it's so in depth, and we've studied we've focused our attention on certain processes very significantly vis-a-vis the larger trends. So it kind of becomes difficult to comment on the larger trends. But the wage question, I think that's quite critical, because like I said, wage is differentiated across regions, right? And with Adivasi circular migrant workers who've been part of the construction workforce in Ahmedabad for a very long time, they have been able to negotiate and demand a certain wage which is higher compared to other regions. And it is that workforce that they specifically want to replace. Because when you talk to labor contractors, when you talk to engineers on site, when you talk to mid management in construction companies, the argument is not of wages, but they will tell you that they are an unreliable workforce. They will tell you that they are seasonal migrants who will keep going back to their village, and hence we do not want them. And of course, that they are asking for a higher wage. But the wage argument is central. Uh, just that it will not come in the articulation. It will be mostly that they are not available for a longer period to work, and it's that workforce that they want to replace, right? And your second question about which are the processes that are being replaced and whether there is a net gain for male workers. We've actually studied those exact processes where women workers have been in large numbers, like whether it's material handling, whether it's concrete production, whether it's masonry and plastering, and we saw what are those techniques through which that labor gets displaced. And the idea of some of these technologies is basically to reduce labor intensive work, right? So usually when you think of automation, your imagination is of a robot, right, to do certain tasks that will replace a particular worker. But here you have certain kinds of techniques which will reduce labor. For example, your formwork innovations are all about reducing on-site labor. Your precast technology is all about reducing on-site labor. So what you will produce off-site with very few workers will be sufficient to do the work that would have been done by a large number of workers on site, right? So those are the precise processes we've studied to be able to say that, okay, these techniques have changed and labor intensive processes are declining. Whether that's leading to net gain of male workers is not something that I will be able to comment on right away. Your third question about union and how they have been responding. I think it's been an interesting journey for the union too, because I don't think this problem has been articulated even by the union. It's construction workers union is a predominant male workers union. There is definitely a good presence of women workers. Our recommendations would have shown you that they're mostly geared towards either the state or the industry. But some of the things that we do as civil society organizations, and it's our mandate and our responsibility, is also to increase feminist leadership and thinking within the unions. So our study has been part of that thinking, to look at how in all of these technologies or these kind of changes are affecting women workers, and why is there declining participation, how it actually comes down to thinking, why is women's participation less in the union too, right? Uh, so our effort has been to build that voice, to build that strength, and to also equip the union with certain findings that they can use to then negotiate and bring in more women in the sector.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just like to make a comment as the next person starts to speak. I think the one thing that's been really uh, challenging, even when studying the gig economy, is to really try and assess the cognitive impact of all of these changes on a person, right? How much time a person spends in having to even make sense of the way technology is shaping around them, and how many wages are lost in doing that, how many relationships are lost and change in the midst of doing that. I think it's coming out very clearly in these examples. Please
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Hi, Geeta. Excellent presentation. My name is Sangamitra. I'm from KHPT, predominantly a public health organization. I have questions related to health. I don't know if conversations that you had as part of your FGDs and IDIs talked a little bit or got to some perspectives and insights of how perhaps mental health, isolation, given their histories and the way the labor workforce is now changing and the world around them is changing and gender-based violence is playing out in this new context, number one. Number two, we skipped your recommendation slide and you just mentioned creating avenues or awareness and ability to grow leadership within the unions and female leadership. So there's articulation of this as an issue and then taking this up. What are the other leverage points outside of this for recommendations for what civil society can do? Actionable. What are the pathways? What are the low hanging fruits? What's really tough? So what can we do to better this situation? Because this is eye opening for us, and we come from my colleague Geeta Thatra and I are here today. Largely looking at things from a health perspective, social determinants of health as well. So stepping back and looking at this as opportunities for women. This is one of the most dangerous sectors there is, construction. They live on site, they breathe the air, they're surrounded by things that can affect them physically and mentally. And then there's family dynamics and things like that. So what can we do as civil society to make things better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I'll answer your second question first because I don't think we spend too much time discussing health outcomes or health impacts of either technological change or just construction work, what kind of physical and mental stresses that it creates. But definitely work needs to be done, and there is some work along those lines. It's something that we were not very specifically exploring. Having said that, to your second question about what civil societies can do, I think there are a couple of interventions that Ajivika Bureau has already worked around, and they seem to be offering a way forward. And one of the and other unions too in the construction space have been doing it, which is providing on-the-job trainings for women workers in trades that otherwise they were just helpers. They were just as working as helpers, right? So during this process itself, this avenue of training women in tile cutting, marble fitting opened up, and there were a lot of women who expressed interest to pursue that kind of training opportunities, and it sort of creates an opportunity to both leverage that training and increase their wage and continued participation in the sector, right? So civil societies definitely can pursue that trajectory. Having said that, it's not something that civil societies can do on its own at a scale. What they can do is perhaps model, pilot certain interventions and be able to show how it's done. But one of our recommendations has been that actually two around skilling. One is there are industry programs for skilling, which we need to press that they need to ensure women's participation in those programs. It's not that the industry doesn't do any of it on its own. There are large companies which offer either on the job training or off job trainings, but it's important to mandate women's participation in that. And second is that construction is also a heavily government funded sector, right? There are huge projects that are government funded. So pushing for certain kinds of mandates, reservation mandates of women workers or participation of women in some of those projects is important. If the government can come up with 100 regulations of what kind of material you can use and what kind of safety protocols you have to ensure, why not say that, okay, you have to have 10% or 20% women on your work sites? How difficult is that, right? But we need to push some of those agenda. But for civil societies, definitely to work with training institutes, to work with government, support on the job training, because it's tough to imagine a training model that does not take into account workers who are already there at the work site, right? So that's one. And second is like I was saying, that it's important to create an enabling environment. So childcare and creche facilities is fundamental to that environment. And as an organization, we are able to sort of support it is a legal obligation for employers to provide creches and childcare facilities on sites. But if civil society organizations can support employers in running those facilities or in setting up those facilities, that's another low hanging fruit that we can pursue. And the moment we are in a mode of collaboration with industry players, they're willing to participate. We've at least had that kind of experience in Ahmedabad, where employers are willing to talk to you and be experiment on some of these interventions.
There's a question at the back.
So my initial question was on capacity building for women, but you've just answered that. So maybe if I could ask you about, um, you just spoke about institutionalizing some of these things, including care work, crashes. But even in the corporate world, not much of that has actually happened, right? Uh, uh, Including childcare, but not limited to childcare, even caring for the elderly, a lot of things that we have to do in terms of just showing up to work. So, how far or how much do you think we can actually get it done? Or what do you think we have to do, at least within academia, to sort of enable that?
What we have to do
Big
within
question.
academia to enable something like this. I think one significant role of academia is to continue pursuing the kind of research that's critical of, or that's produce kind of knowledge that will help us to make sense of the changes that are going on, as well as point us in directions that will make these changes for the better. So I think at least a crucial role of academia is to deepen this knowledge of the changes that are ongoing.
There's a question at the back.
Hi, thank you for your talk. My question is regarding the table you showed, right? The payment schedules. You could say that the worker from Bihar and West Bengal were the lowest paid among the states. So the Jharkhand and Bihar, West Bengal. So what would explain this interstate disparity in terms of, is it because they are proportionally not represented in the workforce in Gujarat, or what could describe that? And secondly, I was also thinking, from looking at the film also and listening to a presentation, that we talk about glass ceilings, but this is literally a concrete ceiling that women workforce is facing in this industry. So I was thinking about the statement coming from the contractor and the safety officer saying that it is dangerous to let women work here, and we don't want all that trouble, so we will not take in women as workers. Is it because there are strong insistence that the construction workers are recognized within POSH and other acts? One is, A, are they included in the POSH Act, where they can go to the district magistrate and file a complaint? Two, you had a question in one of your slide about BOCW and their inclusion in it. So if you could slightly talk about that. Yeah, I think that's okay.
Thanks. First question about differences in regional differences of wages. One of the reasons is recruitment patterns and what labor contractors are committing to these workers from different states. And second is the kind of work that they do on site. So a lot of workers coming from Jharkhand and West Bengal particularly, they are largely manual workers. And manual workers both as helpers as well as in certain skilled trades, but very much into manual labor. So first of all, when you are hiring workers for manual labor, your wages are low. And second is labor contractors are also getting into wage arrangements where they are saying that we'll pay you certain amount, but if you take an advance. So there is also an advance-based payment system, right? And a lot of workers who are coming from Jharkhand and West Bengal are coming through these advance payment systems, where they will take an advance back in the village when they are coming to work at the construction site. And what they get on the site is not necessarily a wage, but it's called kharchi. Once in 2 weeks or once in a week, they will get this kharchi to be able to sustain for the few months that they are there on the site. Right. So these are wage negotiations that happen back in the village while they're part of the migration cycle. And during that process also, it is depending on the labor contractors who would have said that this wage includes your housing, it includes your travel to the city and back. So depending on the arrangement, it will be negotiated. And for West Bengal and Jharkhand particularly, it's also that they are coming from really distressed regions of those states, is what we have sort of observed. But we didn't go into the district level or very state specific understanding of this. But and we stopped at the level of just trying to note that there is a disparity and trying to say that, okay, this disparity is linked to recruitment patterns and it's linked to wage negotiations at the source. But what specifically a particular region and district is contributing to is something, again, that needs deeper inquiry. That, again, we felt was beyond the scope of our own work. Your second question about whether women are included in POSH committees, a lot of women are not included in the POSH. I don't think they even know that POSH committees exist on in these companies, and they may have POSH committees for their formal workforce, but whether it's accessible to an informal worker who's either living on site or in a neighbor naka is questionable. They can, of course, go to the local committee. Every worker is entitled, every informal worker is entitled to go to a local committee. But again, how much awareness, what is access is questionable. What was your third question?
I think BOCW.
BOCW, yes. So a lot of construction workers are mostly seen as on-site workers. So with this changes that's happening with off-site construction processes, are these workers construction workers? Precast factory workers are factory workers, but they are integral part of construction work. So are they entitled to benefits under the BOCW? Is a question.
Taking from your last comment, you mentioned why can't the government mandate like hiring more women in a certain percentage? And I was thinking of the garment factory, where a lot garment and other industry policies, let's say from Tamil Nadu recently in their latest budget announcements happened, and lot of these industries came forward and said we'll make a reservation for to hire 30 or 50% of our labor as women. Um, can something like that ever happen in construction? But because like garment usually has more of women workers, and here that it doesn't have that tradition.
We've made that recommendation. We do think unless there's a push from certain sides, it won't be possible. So I always give this example of IITs where back in 2017 they came up with a supernumerary seat for undergraduate students in all engineering fields to be at least 20%. The representation was as low as 7 or 8%, which has jumped to 20% in 4 years in most IITs, except I think Kharagpur, if I'm not mistaken. In 4 years or 5 years, all IITs have 20% at least at their undergraduate level. So it's not impossible. I do think affirmative action policies are required.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to use my role as a moderator to ask a last question that's been pressing on my mind. Um, so you helped us understand within the study two different types of major construction work, form work and the other, and how that's changing internally. Can you and how women are articulating it? Can you help us understand what's happening with the labor contractor, right? Because it also seems like the enterprise form is also shifting. Um, what was considered a unit of maybe a contractor and certain labor might be shifting because there are now corporate third party entities that would be doing the factory work, right? Mixing the concrete at the factory site. So what's happening to the role of the contractor? Is it is it exactly as it was before? Do they continue to have the same amount of power? Is it shifting? Are they starting to feel some of this impact? What's happening with them? Do they not care? Is it easier for them to do this?
Like there's diversity among workers, there's also a diversity among contractors, right? So you will have contractors. Like I said, in one of the projects that we were studying, there were about 200 subcontractors. So you will have some subcontractors who are corporate entities who will provide certain machinery and their workforce. For example, in the steel composite formwork, their subcontractor was a Bangalore-based corporate entity which supplied those formwork to the Ahmedabad, and they also sent their workforce, right? So that is one kind of contractor where there is a different kind of negotiation of the parent or the main principal employer with that contractor. But you'll also have a contractor who is bringing 10 workers from Bihar or 10 workers from Jharkhand. So you will have and for a different trade. So the nature and level of contractor is also quite varied. And that's again an interesting question to pursue to see what is happening to these various levels of contracting. And but definitely they do have a lot of say, either as suppliers of labor or in terms of supplying certain kinds of equipment and technology to the worksite. So there is a significant role that a contractor plays, and that's also one of the reasons why we spend so much time just talking to them about their gendered understanding and assumptions of women's work and so on, because it is some of that really plays at the ground level in terms of whether women will actually become part of the workforce or not. But definitely they have a very significant role to play, continue to play a very important role. Just that I think it will be different bargaining at the level of the contractor, depending on whether they are an individual who's sourcing labor or whether they are a corporate entity that's applying certain kinds of technology and workforce. So I think that will be the difference.
Okay.
But definitely we couldn't follow through with these varied levels of contractors within our study itself.
200 contractors.
Yeah,
Would be a
it's
study
tough.
in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we will wrap up with this. I want to thank you so much, Geeta, for doing this and sharing this. And to everyone listening online and here, please go. You can download the report. It's accessible on the Workfare and Free site and many other knowledge publications that tell the story of changing sectors. So thank you so much, Geeta.
Thank you for all those wonderful and difficult questions. Also helps us think through some of the gaps in our own work and also pursue it in more depth. Yeah, but like Aditi said, the report is available. We hope to put out the film also very soon. So it will be available on our YouTube channels, which you can watch if you would like to again. And we've also made it in such a way that it can reach wider audience even without our presence, with workers themselves articulating some of the changes that we have spoken about through the research. So we really hope that we'll take this conversation to far more places. Thank you.